How's it going, everybody? It's Carpo here once again. It's about a week out from Christmas and it's the holiday season, and it's a great time for proselytizing. I was actually thinking when I started this video that I'm sitting in my church right now, that my home is my castle, but my castle is my church. And sitting here in this center here that I am with my records and my stereo and art supplies, those are somewhat my my spiritual practice, my art form, if you will. The things that get me closer to what I consider to be God, if there was such a thing. That I see truth within everything, not truth as used today in some kind of like, I know the truth, but rather seeing that everything is truth, that life, existence, it's undefinable sometimes, but what I'm trying to say anyhow. But a few days back, a couple of Mormons came to my door, and I actually did a video a couple months ago about some other Mormons who came, but they showed up. I was right in the middle of doing something. I was just not wanting to chat at the moment, and I said, you know, I'd love to talk, but I'm right in the middle of something. You know, and they were like, well, when's a good time to come back? So I said, you know, tomorrow would be fine. I forgot I had a dentist appointment. So anyhow, they came while I was at the dentist. My wife told them, oh, he's at the dentist. I don't know when he'll be back. I figured they weren't going to come back, and that was about a week and a half ago. And then they just showed up yesterday evening. So I really wasn't in the mood to talk to them, but I found this interesting, for me, conversation is difficult to start. But once we get flowing, it's, you know, once you get into the conversation with someone, or I do, then I can flow and start to enjoy the conversation. It always starts with a little small talk, but this time he returned. This was two Mormons, Elder John, and all the male, the male youth that go out on their missionary journeys. The women are called sisters and the boys are called the elders. So we had Elder John, and this time he was with another guy, Elder Kirby. And Elder John, I think, was from, he said from Arizona, which I said, oh, you guys from Utah? He said, no, I'm from Arizona. And the other guy was actually from Oregon. So we started talking, and I had my voice recorder going, my little Tascam voice recorder, because I wanted to record the conversation for my own sake. And I'm glad I did, because going back, I realized how overbearing I really was with these poor young kids. The fact that it's not that I didn't let them get a word in edgewise, but rather they didn't know how to respond. And if I waited for more than a few seconds and they didn't respond, I would go on to the next, you know, subject. And I thought about uploading the conversation, or at least the final part of the conversation. But you know, it was a personal conversation on their part, and without their permission, that probably wouldn't be right. So anyhow, we didn't argue, we didn't debate, there was no conversion. You know, proselytizing is the idea that they're trying to convert a person, right, or to get a person to see their religion, which is something that in the years past I would have slammed the door in their face when I was younger. Just say, get out of here, you know. I'm sick of people showing up with religion. I even used to have a sticker that says, you know, no soliciting, and we are happy with our religion, that kind of thing. And I really gave it some thought over the years. You know, these poor kids have grown up, this is what they believe. I'm not poor kids, but I should say I feel sorry for them when people are rude to them. And after having conversations with them, for the most part, they say that most people are pretty respectful, and I would understand. I could respect that. The Jehovah's Witnesses that I've encountered in my life are less than adequate as far as their willingness to listen, to actually discuss. For them, it's all about telling you what the truth is, and they don't want to hear anything from you. But these guys, these younger guys, these Mormon kids, they've always been very courteous, very kind, respectful. They, I have more in common with Mormons than with, let's say, a lot of the, I'm not going to define people as atheists or any other religion, but I just say that the family values that Mormons share and their dedication to their families and their cause is something very noble, and something that I think a lot of people should envy, in the sense that, you know, we don't have to take the dogma and believe in a religion to have that community. But anyhow, so we got into the conversation about towards the end of the conversation, we started talking about heaven, and I asked the kid, I said, I spoke to a couple Mormons a while back, and I said, if I'm not mistaken, isn't there like a period of judgment after you die, according to Mormon belief, where you go and you can decide whether or not to take Jesus into your heart, or whether or not you choose to ask for forgiveness. Basically, you can spend your whole life, and he confirmed this is true, you can spend your whole life, just doing what you like, believing what you like, and then after you die, according to them, you have a period between here and there where you get to choose whether or not you want to take Jesus. Now that, to me, I said, I told the kid, I said, I'm all for that. I said, sounds great to me, but there's no sense of urgency, and I've been curious about this. The Christian will tell you, well, you need to be forgiven now. You might die tomorrow and go burn in hell for eternity, which, like I told him, I said, burning in hell for eternity is impossible. I should say suffering in a burning pit of fire is not possible, because suffering is only in comparison to times when you're not suffering. So like I said to the kid, I said, well, what would happen if you were thrown into a lake of fire? You'd burn for a minute and go, ow, 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 ow. And then after a couple of days, it's just like, ow, ow. I mean, that's just metaphor. It doesn't make sense. It has no basis in any reality that I could ever imagine. But to go back to the heaven thing, this is what was interesting to me. Because I said, and I don't think he'd ever thought this through, and I said, well, heaven, it seems like an interesting concept. I said, how well do you remember when you were 5 years old? I was like, you tend to forget those things, don't you, that you did? You remember little bits and pieces. And I said, by the time you're my age, in your 40s, you're going to look back on your 20s and you're going to feel the same way. You're going to kind of forget who you were. You're going to forget some of those past memories, because we're always changing. So if you were to go to heaven for eternity, eventually, basically, I said, you would get bored. I said, how I put it, I said, if I were to leave this body, one of the most interesting concepts to me is the fact that I wouldn't be able to feel my hands anymore, wouldn't be able to feel my body, I wouldn't be able to see through these eyeballs in this three-dimensional reality. And I said, that would make it really hard in the afterlife. And he goes, oh, no, I believe that in the next world, I'm going to be just as I am now. And I said, so you believe that you'll be made of skin and bone, and you'll have a three-dimensional reality in the afterlife? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, so what's this heaven like? Is it is there any type of controversy or negativity or pain? He's like, no, it's all just great. You live with your family and you're happy. And I said, that sounds like a nightmare to me. Not the happy part, but the fact of never. I said, if I can't fall down and scrape my knee, or if I can't accidentally get hit by a baseball or risk getting hurt somehow, then really, what is there to live for? What is there to exist for in this eternity? And I could see that the wheels were turning, and he just kind of didn't really have a. He goes, oh, let's back up for a minute. He's like, you said that, in judgment you can wait until you die, and he said, but why would you want to procrastinate? And that's what he said. Why would you want to procrastinate on being blessed? And I said, it's not procrastination. I'm already blessed. I said, the only world I know for sure is this world. And I feel blessed within it. I have a family that I love, friends. I'm fed. I have shelter. I have no desire for fame or fortune or greed. I've learned my lessons young. I've experienced loss. I've experienced gain. And I just said, well, what else is there? And he just didn't have a response to that. And it's interesting, because usually these people, who spend all this time preparing, have answers to some basic questions. People like, well, what did Jesus do here? Or what did Jesus say about this? But when it's existential philosophical questions about life, I just hope that they can walk away with something to ponder. And like I told him, I said, years ago, I was a different person when it came to how I felt about religion. Nowadays, I'm much more accepting and tolerant, because I know it helps a lot of people. But I just don't understand, because like I told the guy, I said, my version of what God is to me is so personal, and I don't even talk about it. I have no interest in trying to define it or explain it to others. It's my personal reality. I never understood why people feel the need to convince others of their version of reality or their version of God. It's almost as if pressuring other people makes us feel better about our own choices. I really don't know. But I'm pretty open and tolerant when it comes to beliefs, as long as they're open and tolerant to other people. And that's what I was trying to convey to those kids. When we were towards the end of the conversation, I told them that it's unfortunate that we have these rose-colored glasses about some of these great philosophers and teachers. We were talking about prophets, and I said, do prophets still exist today? And he's like, oh yeah. And I was like, well, how can you determine whether a prophet's real or not, or whether they're full of shit? And he says, well, Joseph Smith, for example, and he went on to talk about Joseph Smith, who was the founder of Mormonism, and he says, and if you look within the Mormon Bible, it says, and I cut him off, I was like, no. See, that's circular reasoning. You can't use what it says in the Mormon Bible to justify the writer of that Bible as being a prophet. See, it has to be proven elsewhere. Like we were talking about great men of religion who had, great philosophers like Martin Luther in the past. And I said, like our image of Martin Luther or some of these other great speakers or writers, never meet your heroes, because you find out that they're shitbags a lot of the time. It's like people look up to others and then they meet them and find out that they're actually human beings and that they have faults and frailties too. And people don't want to see that. They want to see strong people who are sure of themselves. This is why people fall for these great religious leaders who are so self-assured about what they believe that people, they love that. They move into it. I mean, fools rush into others who pretend to know what they're talking about. But in the end, we're all left with the same questions. Like, whatever you believe, is it actually helping to bring mankind closer together, or is it just separating us among, one thing I guess I realized was that even in a nation that it's a non-religious nation, or a non-religious area, the interesting thing is that these people start to worship their leaders. This is what happens in like North Korea and China, in places where they suppress religion. People look up to their leaders as gods, because people have a desire to look up to something. It's deep psychology within human nature. We want heroes, we want leaders, we want teachers. So if we can't find one within a religion, then we'll just go straight to the leaders themselves, which through history have been supposedly divinely placed there. Now we all realize that they didn't know any better than the next guy. I think that the biggest thing about like forgiveness within religion, and the first thing would be to forgive yourself, not being forgiven or asking to be forgiven for anything, but rather learning to love yourself and understand yourself so you can move through this world. And when we got to the end of the conversation, I guess I kind of got a little overbearing, because I said honestly, Jesus, the Jesus you're talking about the modest man who walked around with sandals and taught people to be humble. And I said, now look at the Mormon church. I said, giant marble hallways and grand galleys, giving 10% of your money to the church. And I just went on and on about it. I said, Jesus doesn't want your money. Jesus does not care how much money you have or how much you give to the church. And honestly, I said, if Jesus is the character you say he is, and he were to return today, he would shake his head in disgust at the fact that people are starving outside the Vatican walls while there's, mounds of profit. The church should not need money. They should not need anything to hang on to in that way. It really, to me, doesn't, money equals power, but it's not real power. Truth is power, because truth allows you to live a better life. And so when I see people who claim that the church does so much good, but then I see that they're consistently begging for money, I don't know. That I have my own views of these things, and I guess that's why I don't want to make a kid feel bad about his whole life that he spent learning these things, and that's what he was sent out with his beliefs. So it's not my right to tell him he's wrong. All I can do is pose questions about it and tell him that I think Jesus would be ashamed of many of the people that claim to be religious these days or followers of Jesus. And I had to explain to him that, you know, Buddha was not a god, and Buddhism isn't really a god or deity-based religion, but rather Siddhartha became the Buddha, that we all become the Buddha. And I said, I believe Jesus' story is the same. He was never telling us to worship him. He said, be like me. The idea is in using your head to decode these things. And that's why I was telling him, I asked the kids if they knew that those plates that Joseph had been, the golden plates that had been decoded, the man who was doing the writing during the translation, his wife was suspect about Joseph Smith, so she had him hide a bunch of the translations and claim that he lost them somehow. And I guess Joseph Smith was pissed off, but he went and he retranslated them, but differently this time. So, I don't know, you know, you pick and choose at all the details of the religion. You've got to look at the bigger picture, you know. So, anyhow, those are just my thoughts. I'm out. Talk to y'all later. Any Mormons out there, feel free to stop by. I'm always up for a chat.